So we've both just had US publication dates. Yours was a week ago today, wasn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So exciting. And yours a week before
Amazing
that.
Acts of Love and War, and mine was Manhattan Girls, which came out 2 weeks ago. Yes, come on, show the book.
It will be back to front, of course. So
yes, I forgot about that.
You've got to be able to read mirror writing.
Yeah. What did you do? Did you celebrate your American launch?
I went out for lunch with a friend, and we raised a glass of champagne and had, talked to each other about books and about writing. So it felt absolutely right.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Well, I had a miracle this year. I don't think it's ever happened before, but my US and UK publication dates were in the same week. And they both had the same cover and the same title, which makes it so much easier. I have a nightmare with different titles, particularly like Jackie and Maria was called The Second Marriage in the UK, and I got people saying I've just bought both by accident. It's really difficult when you have different titles, but there you go. Well, it's not my decision. None of my titles are ever my decision. They change whatever I suggest.
They just, I know.
Did you
exactly
get
so.
Was that Love and More your title?
No, that wasn't my title. I suggested about 30 titles, and they were all rejected. So,
oh my gosh.
You have to think sometimes publisher knows best, don't you? It's kind of mummy knows best.
I'm sure they do. Anyway, because I had both in the same week, we actually did have a little 1920s party in the street outside a North London restaurant. The only problem being that there was a tube strike that day. So it was just locals that came, which was perfect. It was lovely. And we ended up dancing to 1920s music played off a Bluetooth speaker from somebody's phone.
Are you going to
went past?
Are you going to do the Charleston for us tonight?
I don't think there's room on the screen, is there?
You could just do the hands, maybe.
It's still on my Instagram feed. Yeah, I could do a bit of this. So listen, are you juggling lots of different projects at the moment? Are you?
Well, not as many as you, Gill. You are so prolific. I don't know if I've counted right, but I think you've had 9 novels published and 11 and 6 non-fiction books.
No, way more than that. I've done loads of fiction. Yeah.
You've only got that. That's all you've got.
I've only got 6 on my website. Yeah.
And you seem to always have the next one coming. So I don't really know. I would like to do a mind meld with you and find out exactly how you do that.
I have no idea either. I just, I'm given a deadline and I meet it. I am writing one a year at the moment, which is really, really hard with historical fiction. It makes you a complete workaholic because you've got all the research, the writing. And at the moment, as you know, I'm promoting one, editing the novel that's coming out in summer 2023. I think it's September 2023. I'm brainstorming ideas for the 2024 one. So it's a bit, juggling that.
Absolutely amazing. I really don't know how you do it. I think perhaps you're going for a daily cold water swim. Yeah. It fires you up in some way, makes it possible.
That definitely helps. It clears the head, and somehow, it's thinking time away from, the social media and the desktop.
Well, that's very interesting, isn't it? Because I think quite a lot of writing is done not at the screen, at the typewriter, but actually in your head. As you're walking along, I find scenes kind of playing out like a film in my head, and then you've got to get to the keyboard and make them happen, and hopefully so that someone else can see them playing out in their heads.
Yes, I don't walk around with a notebook. My theory is that if it's a good idea, then it will stick in your head until you get back home and can write it down.
Well, that's because you've got a better memory than I have.
Probably the loads I'm forgetting, but hey.
I don't
Talking about your process of coming up with new ideas, and do you have to, when you have something you want to write about, do you pass it by your editor or your agent first? What's your process?
Well, okay. I suppose I have to talk about, as you know, I published 6 poetry collections as well as my 2 novels. And and the process is different for both, but in one sense the same, that you hear or see a little nugget of something and it goes ding, and you think, oh yeah, that's a really great idea, I'm going to try and do something with that. And so then you start to find out more about it, don't you? And either it's dead in the water and you realise nothing you can do with this story at all, or else it just takes over your life and your imagination, and in such a way that you can't do anything else. And then, yes, I have a wonderful editor and agent, and I've got a meeting with my agent at the end of September with too many ideas to run past her, and I guess she's going to say no, maybe that one. Well, I hope that's how it's going to be anyway, that maybe one of them will stick.
Yeah.
What about you? What's your message?
Oh, I've sent a list of 6 new ideas to my US editor, and she's gone on holiday.
Oh.
But usually the process is she'll get back to me and she'll say, no, that one. She's very decisive. I mean, I presume she's talked it through at a publishing meeting, because these aren't just one-person decisions. But
no, because they involve money, so one person doesn't do that, do it?
Sure, but I'm hoping that one of those 6 will stick. Clearly, I've got my favourites in the back of my head, but I don't suggest anything that, I know what you mean about that little, it's like a little buzz, a little thrill you get when you come up with an idea and you think, oh gosh, I could do that one. So I'm looking for, it has to have lots of ingredients to form a novel.
Yes,
it does. And for me, that's got to include some women that I admire, who kind of maybe bucked the trend for their time, stepped outside their time and did something extraordinary. There's going to be some kind of love interest in there. I mean, similar to you, I suppose.
I think very similar. I think we love it when we're researching, don't we? And we come across. I was in the Women's Library at the LSE this week, and came across the letters of a woman, and I just thought, oh my gosh, this is so exciting. How did she do that in that period? Nobody else was doing that, and that is just, as you say, so exciting. But when you say you've sent a list to your editor, how worked out are each of those ideas?
There's a paragraph on each, just a paragraph. Do you know what? I try to write something like what would appear on the back cover copy.
Yeah.
And that's the way I can figure out for myself what the idea really is.
Yeah, because you've got to, because it's a selling game at many points in this lark, isn't it? You better sell it to yourself, or hopefully it sells itself to you, and then you go on. And tell me about the Manhattan Girls, which I absolutely adore. How long have you been thinking about writing about Dorothy Parker? Because I have to say, I have great idea envy with this book. I think, why has nobody written about Dorothy Parker before? It's genius.
She was, big heroine of mine from teenage years, really. And she'd been on my list that I sent to my US editor for about the last 3 times, I think. And she'd said, yeah, write about Dorothy if you like. And I chickened out because it's, talk about imposter. I have imposter syndrome with all my novels, but writing dialogue and thoughts for the wittiest woman in the world. I mean, seriously, who do I think I am? But my editor persevered and she said, go on, do it. You can do it. So,
well, I think you have done it and done it wonderfully. I think what it's done is somehow the Dorothy Parker's wit has seeped into you, and so your writing has become all that.
I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far. What I did allow myself was to think of her as a real person and not just a strung together version of all the brilliant quotes that she's made over the years. But I would love to write the sequel to this one and see her through into her Hollywood years in the 1930s. That's one of the ones on my list. Secrets.
Yeah. But, that was such fun. And that's something else I think we have in common, is that we like to write about real people.
Yeah.
But of course there's a huge problem with that, because you've got to do justice to them. And you've got to imagine all the bits that the biographer wouldn't have included because they haven't got the evidence for, haven't you?
Well, yeah, if the biographer didn't include them and there's no evidence, I think that gives you more freedom to make it up, really, to fill in the gaps. And, like people who, there's a novel about what Agatha Christie did in those missing, days that she went off. And nobody knows for sure, but a historical novelist can just make that up. We're allowed.
Well, I think it's making it up and then trying to mesh it seamlessly with the things that you actually do know. So that in Acts of Love and War, I've got a character called Francesca Wilson, amazing woman. Just, right, I'm a history teacher, but I'm going to go off and save the children of Spain, and off she goes to save the children of Spain. And the words that she says in the novel are verbatim from her own memoir. But then I've had to imagine what she was doing while she was saying those things. So it's trying to get that mix, isn't it? And the same for you with, all the characters in the Manhattan Girls.
Sure, yeah. But when you decided to write about the Spanish Civil War, I mean, huge kudos, one of the most complicated wars to write about, because all the factions and, stuff going on. But what was the idea that came to you first? Was it to have a woman in love with two brothers fighting on different sides of the war, or?
I was lucky. I think there's a huge amount of serendipity in a writer's life. And I was out having lunch with my friend Farah Mendelssohn during Brexit. And I know that she knows a vast amount about the English Civil Wars. So I said to her, come on, give me a great story about the English Civil Wars. I want to write about divided nations. And she said, well, no, I won't do that. But you can have my PhD thesis about Quaker aid during the Spanish Civil War. And I read that, and I was just so bowled over by this tiny handful of people who went out and saved the lives of thousands of children. And I thought I really would like to tell that story. So from that, then came, my imaginary character Lucy and the two brothers who she's in love with and are in love with her, and I wanted to tell the story of both sides. So they came quite quickly to me. But it really was a sort of, oh my goodness, we could have this woman and she could have these two brothers, and and then that slots into the story that was given to me by Farah.
Oh, great present. Isn't it great when somebody gives you an idea?
I know. Come on, audience, send me your ideas.
I've had a couple of the ideas. One, the idea to write about Jackie Kennedy and Maria Callas came to me from a reader in Athens, Barbara Duca. And I dedicated the book to her because of that, because it is kind of the greatest gift you can give to a novelist, isn't it?
It is an extraordinary gift. I mean, my first novel, The Prisoner's Wife, I got the idea of that when I was standing in a lift in an elevator at my mum's sheltered accommodation, and a chap said to me, I could tell you a story about the war that would make your hair stand on end. And I went, right, tell me that story. And, so those gifts are sometimes given to you, aren't they? And to write about Jackie and Maria, again, like writing about Dorothy Parker, it seems so obvious when someone's done it, but up to that point, nobody else had dared.
I didn't actually know at that point quite how closely their affairs with Onassis overlapped. I mean, they really were with him at the same time, and Jackie basically stole him from Maria, if you like, although he was the one doing it. It was, a lot of overlap, let's say.
A lot of overlap. Yes, absolutely. That's what will happen. And your characters in how did you decide on those four? Because there must have been other possibles.
Oh, in Manhattan.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to write about Dorothy, and I didn't want to write about the journalists that she hung out with in the Algonquin Hotel, they all sat around laughing at each other's jokes and then reporting them in the press the next morning. That seemed, it just didn't interest me particularly. Yeah. But in one of the biographies, Marion Mead's wonderful What Fresh Hell Is This?, she mentioned a bridge group that Dorothy started with Jane Grant, Winifred Lenehan and Peggy Leach. And I just took it from there. And I really know nothing about, whether the bridge group lasted 3 weeks or 3 years. I made it into a bit of a longer thing, but I just carried on with that, and it was terrific. It's great fun.
Well, I think it was a marvellous thing and actually very moving and poignant and sad in places, as well as very funny.
Oh, thank you. But I mean, with Dorothy, the thing that's interesting is just this extraordinary wit combined with emotional fragility. So that's what I wanted to try and get across.
Well, I think you absolutely managed that so well. And what about your writing day? How do you manage the writing day?
Well, there's always a bit of social media when you get to your desk in the morning, isn't there? Got to fill that up, and then write for a bit, have some lunch, I go for a swim every lunchtime in open air pond on Hampstead Heath. It's just part of my process. I couldn't do it without it. That's the thinking time, I suppose. The clearing of the head time. If you're stuck at one point in the plot. And I've heard lots of other writers say that either walking or just taking yourself out of your office to a different environment is the way to kind of get through these plot problems. What do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. And sometimes it's walking or swimming. And I like to swim in the sea, but I'm not an all-rounder like you. I don't go all year round. I like to swim in the summer only. Or sometimes it's doing kind of fairly boring household tasks like washing up that your brain doesn't have to be engaged in.
Oh, God, that would never work for me.
Well, I don't know. Driving, walking, having a bath, those, especially anything involved with water where you can't use pen and pencil is very...
The shower, first thing in the morning I have a shower, and that always is, because your brain's quite clear from sleep as well. I think you wake up and there's a bit of empty space in there to have new ideas in. I don't know how it works. I did read an article once about there being particular ions in water that spark creativity, but I've got no idea if I believe that or not. I think that's a bit far-fetched.
Well, I don't know. Maybe something about light, though, about daylight and being out in the natural world. Maybe that does something to the brain.
So when you've had your idea, do you then plan the novel, or do you just dive in and see where it goes? Do you have an outline? Or?
Well, with Acts of Love and War, because as you say, the Spanish Civil War, I knew nothing about the Spanish Civil War. Well, I'd read Hemingway and Laurie Lee and George Orwell, but apart from that, nothing. So I unrolled a piece of plain wallpaper on the wall of my study, and I had a timeline of so I plotted in all the actual events of the Civil War. I got a great big map and put the strings across it of where everybody had to move to. And then a line for each of my characters, what each of them was doing so that I could bring them together in the right places. So there was much more planning than I had anticipated. And the thing I would have loved to have done and didn't manage to do was I had intended, of course, to go to Spain. Mm-hmm. I said to my husband, "Oh, that's great. We can go and do a road trip down, Barcelona, Murcia, down to the south, back up to the Pyrenees." And then came COVID. Mm-hmm. So instead of that, it was books, lovely H.V. Morton travel books from the 40s, and memoirs and things that I could have sent to me at home.
Yeah. Oh, that's a shame. Are you going to do that trip anyway sometime?
There's certainly some lovely museum curators that I want to go and thank in person. Because I emailed them and said, "What about the house in so-and-so street in Barcelona?" And the museum curator emailed back and said, "Well, I'll pop up there at lunchtime and see if I can find it, if it's still there." And so some people were incredibly helpful.
In terms
what about you? Did you go? Did you
no, I was going to ask, in Acts of Love and War, you're telling the story from 3 points of view, aren't you? How do you plan that, or do you just, when you get to the end of one chapter, think, oh, it's time we heard from Lucy again?
I don't think it's quite as conscious as that. I think it's more instinctive that at this point we need to have the input, otherwise we'll have forgotten who that person is. But also, you know, that for the rhythm of the story and for the drive of the narrative, you need to keep feeding in the other part of it.
Yeah.
But you made a decision to have alternating chapters.
I completely did this to myself. So I've got the chapters in Manhattan Girls are from the point of view of Jane, Dottie, Winifred, Peggy. Jane, Dottie, Winifred, Peggy. And that has to happen. It's all through the book. That's the sequence. So I'd absolutely set myself a jigsaw puzzle. So it means that every time I finish a Jane chapter, I have to think of how to carry on the narrative through Dottie's point of view. And so it was quite complicated. It's kind of it's like a Sudoku or something to get it all to fit together.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't just telling their individual stories. There's an overriding trying to look after Dorothy is the main kind of theme going through, but also, you know, the women's friendship as well as their individual stories. It was quite complicated. I don't think I'm quite as neat. You sound very neat with your big strip of wallpaper and your map and whatever. I have just lots of little bits of paper and Post-it notes. I'm a huge consumer of yellow Post-it notes.
Is that? Do you know, I imagined you sitting at your desk with a kind of washing line with Dorothy Parker quotes on it, that you would reach up and go, I think I'll use this one now. But it wasn't like that.
Not quite that organised. No, I've got things bookmarked on the computer so I can usually find them, but not always. It doesn't work.
Oh, it's terrible. That way you know that you've got a quote or a scene that you want to use, and you've got your notebook and you've got all your notes on the line, and where have you got that scene? It's a bit of a large job, isn't it?
It can be. Have you got a general rule about how long you spend on the research, how long on the writing, or do you just have the luxury to sit and see how it goes?
Because I haven't set myself the pace that you have, where you're trying to, you know, where you are successfully writing a novel each year, a great novel each year, blimey. Yeah. I think because I'm not setting myself that, I have got the luxury of saying I can keep going until I feel I've got everything that I need for now. And then, of course, the gaps emerge as you're writing and you have to go off and find other things. But, yeah, not quite like that. You?
Oh, yeah. No, while you're writing, you definitely need to go off and you know, you can fall down rabbit holes. So I'm like, okay, my character's having dinner and it's Paris and it's 1925. Let's find a restaurant. And I'll find a restaurant that was open in Paris in 1925. And I'll find the menu and I'll choose a couple of dishes and I'll write it in. And then I'll just cut that paragraph because it doesn't matter what they were eating, you know. So
but you do spend, one can spend an inordinate amount of time on those little details.
Exactly.
I've got a friend who wrote stories about ancient Rome, and she said that she was writing this scene and she had the character reach for the doorknob, and then she thought, did they have doorknobs in ancient Rome? And spent days trying to find out about doorknobs in ancient Rome. And that's exactly what we do, isn't it?
Yeah. And she didn't need to touch a doorknob at all. She could just open the door.
Just open the door. Absolutely. Absolutely. It can be exactly that, can't it?
Those experience should teach you those things. But listen, I wanted to ask you as well about your journey into publication, because you had all your poetry books. Had you always wanted to write novels? Had you tried writing novels before? Where did the novel?
I think I've been a writer ever since I could read, and I knew that you could make up these stories as well as read them. You could make it go the direction you wanted it to. so I have been writing all my life. I've got notebooks full of stories and poems, but never managed to get any novels published. And they eventually, after a few disappointments, they slid under the bed and were left there to gather dust. And I found it was easier, shall I say, to spend a few days or weeks writing a poem than to spend years on a novel and have it rejected. So, and then began to be published as a poet, and thoroughly enjoyed that. And in fact, the story of The Prisoner's Wife, my first novel, was originally, I wrote that as a long poem, and then thought, no, this is a great story. This deserves a much bigger audience. I'm going to see if I can write it as a novel. What about you? You did a medical degree first, and then moved into English Lit. When did you start writing?
God. Well, no, like you, I always wrote, but my parents said that writing wasn't a career and I needed to get a profession, and so I kind of drifted into medicine without being particularly committed to it, which doesn't work. Fortunately, I got out of that. I studied literature and history, and then I worked in art book publishing for ages, but I was writing all the time as well. And then I got into publishing in a very straightforward way. I'd written a novel in my evenings and weekends. I sent it out, got an agent, and got a publisher. And I thought, wow, this is it. I've arrived. So that first novel was published in 2000 and by Hodder and Stoughton, great publisher. And then another one the following year. And it just, it didn't sell that well. I didn't make a living. I got some lovely reviews, but I couldn't make a living from it. So I went off. For the next 10 years, I just wrote non-fiction, which I could make a living from. Right. And but then in 2012 was the centenary of the sinking of the Titanic, and I'd written a non-fiction book about it. And my partner said to me, why don't you've done the research? Why not write a novel? You know all about the Titanic. I am what we call in the trade, we call a Titanorac. And
okay.
So I couldn't, like you said, I didn't want to spend years writing a novel and have it rejected. So I just wrote an outline for a novel and 20,000 words, and my agent sent it out. Fortunately, the same agent had stuck by me, and I got a publishing deal. So I've been writing novels more or less once a year since then. But
amazing. You see, your first story of I just wrote it and sent it out, it almost makes me want to spit, because that's so not what my experience was. That my initial drafts of The Prisoner's Wife, I approached 20 agents before the 21st accepted it. And then the 21st not only accepted it, but sold it overnight in a preemptive deal to Penguin Random House. So, I guess my message is to people who are writing and wondering whether to carry on is, if you believe in it, if you really believe that you've got a good story there, don't give up.
It's just so subjective. You've just got to get in front of the eyes of the right person who's going to see the potential. So you have to just keep going. I mean, I shouldn't have given up when I did after the second novel.
Right.
But, I had a mortgage to pay, and I didn't have the luxury of being able to spend all my time writing novels. And
you did write some very, very good non-fiction books.
Oh, thank you.
So, they are out there, and they are...
I enjoy that too.
Yeah, well, and it's the same kind of skills, isn't it, of research and storytelling, actually.
Yeah.
You storytell very well in your non-fiction too.
Oh, thank you. I don't think either of us knows how to find out whether there's been any comments coming in to you.
Well,
or questions.
No, I can see lots of people joining.
I can't press the button, I'm going to cut us off. So apologies to anybody that's watching and waving. I'll just see if that works. Yes. And thank you so much for joining us. We're coming up to about half an hour here.
Yeah.
So
it's been really wonderful to talk to you, as always, Gill, and I could go on talking to you for the next 2 hours. But I guess people have got other things they want to do with their day.
Yeah, dinner. My dinner.
or afternoon if they're in the States.
Of course.
Or Canada, of course.
Yeah, listen, thanks to everybody who's joined us tonight, and I will be attempting to save the video so we can post it online, yeah?
Smashing. Thank you so much, Gill. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Lovely to see you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.